Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Narrative Hearts podcast. And this is a show where I am going to be talking with different authors about, and artists too, I suppose, about their work, specifically work that feels very personal and that touches the heart in a certain way. And I'm excited actually for this very first episode, this inaugural episode, because I have a really cool guest, and I've been following her on the gram for a little bit, and she is an author and digital journalist, and she's based out of Michigan, and her name is Miss Brianna Owczarzak. She wrote a book that I'm going to be discussing with her today, and that book is called Tangled Love. It's a modern day romance about a woman who is dealing with some tough family things, but she's on a journey too. She's looking for love, and I think well, you'll hear about it in the conversation I'm going to have with Brianna today. It was just that I thought an amazing debut novel, and I read it. I was surprised by how affected I was by the book. I'm not a big romance person, like in terms of books. I don't read a ton of. I don't go out of my way to read romance stories, but this one really hit me, and I said, "Oh, this is a perfect candidate for this conversation, for a story that feels very personal and that really gets to the core of, you know, the human experience with regard to love and family stuff and tragedy and all these things that are things that we deal with." And so I'm excited to talk with Brianna about her book. So here's that conversation. Um, how are you feeling about talking about your book? Like, what does that feel like to talk about your? Are you tired of talking about the book yet?
No, I've only done like a couple interviews like this, so it's still like new and exciting to me, and I hope that feeling never goes away.
That's awesome. I think that's a fantastic. The notion of that feeling is just like that's really cool. So I was thinking like, I wonder what this is like for her. I'm sure people are like, oh, I read your book, and then it's like international stuff too. I saw some like stuff like on like people are reading it like all these other countries. I was like, what the heck? That's pretty major. That's serious business.
Yeah.
It's like,
I feel like most of my readers, I think, are in India, which is surprising to me.
what do you make of that? What is that about? Did you have any like indication of like what that's about? Like where
So I think it was back in October, maybe. I did like a free ebook promotion for Tangled Love, like ahead of the release of the sequel. And so I think that has a big part of it.
Oh, okay. That's goodness. I was like, yeah, because I was just looking at. I remember when I first finished reading it, and I went to put my review up. I would just before I wrote it, I was looking at other people's reviews. I was like, oh, what's this? This is like India. Da, da, da. I was like, other countries. I was like, what's going on? I was like, wow, this is serious business, man. You got to get like when your book goes international or whatever in that space, you're just like, oh, that's great. It's one thing for people in the country to like people in your immediate community and like people around you to read it, or people just even in other states and stuff. That's one thing, because it's you start understanding like the reach of, oh, like all these people are reading this stuff. But then when you go beyond the borders of the United States, so that's serious business. So I feel pretty fortunate to be talking with you today.
Thank you. And like for me, like it just made me, and I don't even know the word to use, but just that this book could resonate with other cultures too. Like that just made me so happy.
Yeah, I think. See, I think that's such a beautiful thing that you just said, because to me that feels like that's the like the essence of what like all these stories we're telling. What do we like? They're really human stories, really beyond anything else. It's like the notion of that already crosses, just it transcends a lot of different borders that we have. Like it's like, well, oh, this is like this kind of thing could be happening anywhere. Like this story is it's universal in that way. Like it feels it's personal, but it's universal. And I think that that's really cool that that's what I love about, I think, stories and writing and stuff, that it can do that you can just go through all these different stuff. Like, it doesn't, you don't have to speak the same language. You don't have to even understand, like, you just know oh, I know this, I understand this as a human, fellow human to human. I know what this is. I can relate to this. I understand this. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah.
cool.
It was really heartwarming to me to see that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Brandon, I know you're out in Michigan. Did you grow up there?
Yep. I was born and raised here. I've lived in a couple different cities around my hometown most of my life. And then I spent one semester in college in Florida. I interned at Disney World, but other than that, I've lived in Michigan my whole life.
What was Disney World like interning there?
You work a lot, but the perks are fun. You get to go to the parks for free when you're not working. So,
Oh, that's awesome. I can imagine
yeah.
that. I've only been to Disney World once, and it was really brief. I was working actually another job, and the part of the one of the perks were that we got like the special silver. They were celebrating like an anniversary for the company, and we got these special silver bands to go into the park and like explore the stuff at it. So it was, but it was messed up because we were working all day. You only had like an hour really to like, or less to like explore, like, and Disney World's massive. So you get
Yeah.
one place is like, that's like a couple hours just exploring the full to get the full effect of it. And if you have like 30 minutes or whatever, or 45 minutes,
You don't get like
not
any
really-
of it.
you get like a little bit of like, I got to take a couple pictures and like got some food, like a little bit of food. Oh, what's this? And then had to, because they were closing the thing. I was like, okay, that kind of sucks. So one day I hope to go
You
back
have to go back.
really, or like take like a week or whatever, like 2 weeks, and just explore the full thing. So
Yes.
that's awesome that you guys do that. And so I think I was like, oh, I had lost my train of thought. I was thinking about
That's okay.
that kind of thing happens. But it bears me by the way, if anything comes up for you, feel free to, like, you're more than welcome to ask questions too. So if this is not like it just like,
Okay. Edgar's sitting right next to me. He keeps trying to play. So if you hear him bark,
yeah,
he would have to play.
That's awesome. So Brianna, I want to ask you about writing in journal. Did you always write when you were growing up?
So I've been writing like as far back as I can remember. When I was like in probably first grade is probably when I first started writing, and it started with like roses are red poems for like my dad and stuff, like on Christmas and Father's Day. So it started with like just cheesy poems for family, and then like through middle school and high school, like poetry is how I really expressed myself. Like going through my adolescence and everything, I like was insecure, as I feel like most like teenage girls are, and so I used poetry to express myself. And then I had some teachers in high school that like really showed me that I had a talent for writing and I should stick with it. So that encouraged me to pursue a career in writing.
That's awesome. Did you
Thank you.
did you have some things what were your favorite things to read as a kid? Like, did you have like favorite books that you would gravitate to that helped you when you started thinking, okay, I'm gonna be doing some writing? Like, what are some stuff that you would like, what am I gonna read when I get some inspiration to write some stuff? Like, what did you read as a kid?
So in elementary school, I was obsessed with the Boxcar Children series, and all the adventures they went on. And then Harry Potter, when those books came out, I like was always standing in line for the release and read it like in the first day or two that it came out. I was a huge Harry Potter fan.
Wow. Well, you're in pretty good company. I got into the books late. Actually, I think I was in college. I had a friend who was like in his 50s. He was like, I used to work with him, and he was a huge Harry Potter fan. So he gave me a book, and I'd had it for like a year or two before I actually started reading it. And I think the first movie got me. I said, this movie's good. I'm gonna read the book now. And then that was
Yeah.
it's like I started doing the releases, going like, but at that point, the first 4 books were already out, and so I just bought them. I went into, and then I did the release for it. Oh, I think I ordered, I think number 5 when it first was like, okay, that was when Amazon was like really, remember the box, it was like, I was like, oh, not, 5 is like, that's a thick book. So it's like,
Yeah.
like, so I completely, I completely understand that feeling. Let me ask you just as an aside, what is your Hogwarts house? Do you have a house?
Yeah, I'm a Slytherin.
That's awesome. So I'm a Ravenclaw.
Okay.
But but I wrote a fan fiction story that I never finished. But my lead character, she was a Slytherin, so I was like, okay, let's give some Slytherin some love, like, because I think it's important that people from Slytherin house get love too. Like, it's not like it's so don't feel embarrassed.
Yeah.
Don't be embarrassed.
We're cunning and charming.
Yeah, don't be embarrassed.
We're not all Malfoys.
Right. No, exactly right. That's not the way to go. So I think there's some good Slytherins in the mix too. So and I think that's
Yes.
cool that you. So I'm gonna ask you about. So you mentioned you were writing poems as a kid too. Like would you say poetry is like was that your first foray into writing? Like would you say it's like your first love of writing?
Yeah. And I would just call poetry my first love in general, because
Oh yeah.
to me, poetry is like the love language. It's so romantic. And one person can read one poem and like take it a whole different way than somebody else reading that same poem. And that's what I love about it. Like two people can take two completely different meanings from the same piece of work.
Wow. Yeah, that's actually I think that's one of the things I appreciate most about poetry too. Like I remember I was late into poetry. I was doing prose a lot before, but then poetry is like, but it's just a whole other world of expressing. And it is super romantic. Like there's something super romantic about the notion of trying to express feelings and images and stuff in ways that are not sort of clear cut. Like, oh, this rose is red, or this is like you're playing with like layers and stuff. And I think no, you can join the conversation. I guess that people have stuff.
He wants me to throw his ball.
That's awesome. I wanted to ask you, did you have favorite poems? Like, do you have a favorite? Like, right? Like, what's your favorite?
So I recently discovered the poet Atticus. I don't know if you've heard of him. I posted.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I saw the
So I posted a couple book reviews on my Instagram recently of a couple of his books that I've read. And one of my all-time favorite books now is his series of poems and his book called The Truth About Magic. And at the end of the book, he has this beautiful poem that basically just describes how magic is everywhere. Like it's in you, it's in me, it's in the wind, it's in the trees, it's in a like first kiss, it's just everywhere. And to me, I just thought that was so beautiful.
That is beautiful. My goodness. That sounds like, yeah, I need to, I saw the post of the book and I thought, oh, it's actually really good. It's funny because I was looking at like, what are some other poetry books that I could, be getting back into, like as far as reading books of poems, poetry, like, which is a great, just having like this anthology thing of just like beautiful. And there's so much, like I think there's such a misconception. I remember talking to some other friends who like, there's the appeal of poetry books. It's like, oh, they're too short. And it's just like, it's not even, there's nothing there. But if you like even short poems, there's like tons of stuff in a stanza. There's all
Yeah.
like stuff to explore, and you wonder like, there's no way people are talking for 3 hours about this 2 stanza thing like poem. But that's part of. But there's a magic in that too. There's magic in that. Like there's like all this like stuff and layers.
And I also feel like the mood you're in when you read a poem, like you could be happy and read a poem and take one meaning out of it, and then go back and read that same poem when you're like feeling sad or having a bad day or something and take a whole nother meaning out of it.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's the whole other thing. I think too. That's like that's part of the major experience of what it is to experience poetry. Like that's like, And then the other thing too, I think that's cool is like the there's a really, I mean, as a writer of poetry too, you might appreciate this too. Like this, I feel like you can get really nerdy in the like the poetic forms, like what is the internal line rhyme scheme like, and what is the are you doing like like we're gonna do like, oh, look at the enjambment here, this line that does this, and it's like you're looking at the sort of the form of the poem, like what does it look like on the page? There's something really like, I mean, I love that kind of stuff. Just like the emotional stuff is stirring inside you, but you're also going, oh man, look at how she played with this rhyme and this off rhyme, and this is a near rhyme here, and it's like you're looking at all the different like pieces of it. And I think that's such a cool thing that you don't often get to really explore. If you're writing prose, sure, you can have lyrical lines. There's poetry in prose as well, but it's very different when you're doing like when you're reading like a proper poem, even like narrative poems that are more sort of prose poems and stuff like that. There's like a really cool, and you can have all that and still be taken for a ride emotionally, which is an awesome thing about uh, that romantic form of writing, expressing yourself.
Yeah. And for me, like as a journalist, I always enjoy looking at like when a poet doesn't use proper grammar or capitalization. And like I wonder like what their mindset was behind that and why they chose that route.
No, yeah, that's actually really cool. Sometimes it's like you think like, is there like a right? I think the same thing. Like, why did they do that? And it's not like it's a like there's that's what's cool about that because you're not like, oh, that's weird that they did that, but it's part of the there's something that that sometimes there is a logic to it. Sometimes it just you feel it. You're just going, all right, it just feels like
Yeah.
it's this, and we're gonna just go with this. I like, and then you look at it, it's like, oh, all right, I like this. I like how this feels. I like this.
And so Atticus in his poems, like in his book, he has 3 poetry books out right now, and he separates them in different like sections of the book, kind of like chapters almost.
Oh
So if he
yeah.
wants to join. And so some of them are like childhood. And so I've noticed that in his like childhood poems, I don't think he actually wrote them as a child, but
Right.
he's trying to bring that youthful experience. And
Yeah.
so like doesn't capitalize words that should be capitalized, and it like really pulls out that
Oh,
youthfulness of the
that's
poem.
cool. Yeah, that's awesome too, because it really like, accentuates like the vibe of like, hey, this is what like you and there's clear intent around that. Like we're gonna do this and make it feel like a kid was expressing this. Like this is what the and I think that's the beauty of that too. Is like there's something so pure about the express. If you think about how kids express themselves, and there's a purity in like how kids it's very straight up. There's not a lot of nuance and stuff of how the which
Yeah,
is
they're
what,
so innocent.
yeah,
I miss it.
right. Which is awesome. Like, oh, this is very like clear cut. Kids are very honest. Like they're not going to be like, it's this or this. Like, do you like it? No,
Yes.
I don't like this. They'll tell you straight up whether or not they don't. And that's really cool to be able to be. And I think that's to do that in a poetry, you're expressing. There's something so honest about that kind of like we're going to express it this way as a, as a kid. And there's a real purity in that. Like no matter how nuanced the poem itself is, that I find that like there's some real like sparkly glittery stuff about how awesome that is. That's really cool. That's Brandon, do you read ever, like have you ever done readings, poetry readings? Have you ever gone like
No.
read stuff?
Like I just recently started posting some poems on my Instagram page, and like this is my first time really sharing my poetry
Yeah.
with others. And I feel like publishing my first novel helped me get over that fear and that vulnerability of putting your work out there.
Yeah.
Because like poetry to me, when I write a poem, it's super vulnerable. And I actually wrote one poem about the vulnerability of it. And I don't remember it word for word, but it was basically like with every line I write, a part of my soul is revealed, is no longer hidden in the depths of my shadow.
That's beautiful. That's actually really beautiful. And I think too, like given like talking about like you brought up something really um just lovely about this, the notion of like writing in general. When as writers, there's something quite vulnerable about the act of. So there's one thing to write sort of in solitary space, like where no one's going to see anything, whatever. But then once you start like you doing a little bit of this, there's this happening, and you go, okay, well, all right, what is this? And then what is that about? Like when you do, and especially when you're sharing pieces that feel very like personal, even though they're pieces of you. Like there's a version of you on the page that's not the same as like me and you were talking. Like this is the version of Brianna I'm talking to, and the version of Brianna on the page is another. That's another version. But it's like there's something like, oh, this is like, it's no less true. It's no less honest than the person you're sitting next to talking to. So it's like there's something about like, oh wait, people are going to see this and they're going to read this and really sort of know this other piece of me. And it's like there's a piece, especially of something that's so like, oh, this is something that's very here for me, and I have to figure like how to like, how to navigate that within them. So I think that you have which I think that's one of the things that's, I guess if I can segue to the book, is about the part of the that's what I loved about this book was how vulnerable it is. Like there's something very like rich and real about it. And I think when you write, so I guess what I want to ask you about that piece is that how was it conscious to be vulnerable? Like, how important was that for you in writing the book? Was it just, did you think about it, or was it just more like, I'm just going to tell this story, and it's going to be whatever it is when it's done?
So when I started writing Tangled Love, um, I just sat down and wrote it with the thought that I've always wanted to write a novel. And because the pandemic, I had this extra time and I decided to use that to go after this gold mine. I had no intention of publishing it when I sat down to write it. Like I just wanted to write a book. I didn't know if it would be any good or not. So once I finished it, I like shared it with a few close friends and I was like, hey, I did this thing. Like I'm really proud of it, but like I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, but they loved it and they were like, you need to publish this, like people need to read this book. So they encouraged me to take that step and put myself out there.
Wow, that's well. I'm glad they did, because I know I definitely was like, this book is this is your first. What? It feels like you'd written several books already before. It's like this is a debut novel. It's not. It's not. It's like this is like. No, yeah, no. So I'm glad that you were encouraged to do it. I'm glad that this book is here, and I'm curious. Where did you have the idea for the story already? Like before you, like how long? Where did the idea come from? Like why this particular story? Why romance? And like why? What was that like? What was that about?
um, So I have it's a short story writing prompt book that I like to take with me when I travel to like when I'm on layovers at airports or whatever, just write in to kill time. And there was a scene from one of my short stories that I loved. It's actually the huge plot twist. I think it's chapter 21. I'm not going to go into details,
Yeah,
but you'll
yeah,
know what I'm talking about.
yeah.
That was in the short story. And I loved that scene so much that I knew I wanted that to be in my book. So when I started writing the book, I had that scene in mind. And it was just two characters. That's all that was in that scene. Um, and so the rest of the story kind of just came together leading up to that.
Oh, that's awesome. Like, and why Tangled Love, the title? Like, I mean, I think it's perfect. Like, that's exactly perfect. I'm saying, was it easy to come up with the title? Because I feel like having written a story like that, you're going like, dang, what do I call this book? Like, what is the, but it feels like it's like, that's the essence of the book. Like, that's the book. Like, that's the, so
Yeah.
was it easy to come up with that title?
So I didn't come up with the title until the book was done,
Mm.
and then the title just clicked.
Yeah.
And there actually is another book called Tangled Love. So after I came up with the title and I saw that, I was like, I don't know if I want to share the same title as another book because that could cause confusion with readers.
Yeah.
But the title is so fitting to this book. I tried to come up with a separate title, but nothing fit like Tangled Love.
I no, I can that was literally my experience with my book too. Like at the same situation, I'm like, oh gosh, do I have to change the title? So I know. So I'm hearing. I'm going. I know that that's exactly what I wrote.
And there's millions of books out there. So any title you come up with, there's probably going to be another book with
Yeah,
that same title.
yeah, and it's like when you come up with an alternative, it somehow doesn't sound as good. Like it's like, well, this is
Yeah.
okay, this is all right, but then he goes like, does it fit the story though? Does it feel like it actually? This is the heart of the story. I feel like this title works. You know? So, and similarly with Tangled Love, I was like, oh, this you couldn't have called this book anything else. Like that's the title for the book. That's what it is. It's a Tangled Love,
Yeah.
Tangled Love. That's what I'm like, oh man, this is like I feel like were there any challenges for you during the writing process? Like what was was it was it a hard book to write?
So from when I sat down and started writing the book to having it published, it was only 2 months. So it was
Oh,
super quick and came
wow,
together a lot sooner than I thought it would be.
wow,
But
amazing.
because of the pandemic, I had one furlough day every week from work. And so I
Yeah,
treated that furlough day as a typical work day where I would just sit down and write for 8 hours.
yeah. Oh,
And so I use that as motivation to get it done.
oh, that's awesome. Wow. Is that your typical like when you write like for you, like is there a typical is it 8 hours? Like just for anything else you're writing, like is it like what does a typical writing day look like? Is it just like I'm gonna write
Um,
for this amount of time and take a break or
So a typical writing day now is not as often as it should be.
yeah.
I need to be more because I'm working on my next novel, and I need to be more disciplined with writing because now I don't have that furlough day. I don't have the extra time. And I recently just got promoted and it's
Yeah.
more hours.
Yeah.
And so it's just finding time now because I don't have that allocated time. So finding time to write now is probably the hard part.
Yeah. Oh man. Yep. No, I can relate for sure. It's always that like that balance of trying to how do you navigate the space of time to be like, okay, well, there was a space of time you had, and then obviously life is always moving and shifting and stuff. So there's less time for this, and I got to you're like, how do I get better at like being more disciplined about having the space to write this stuff? Like oh gosh, like are you close? Like how far are you into that next novel? Are you pretty deep into it, or like you still like it's the early stages still, or like you're almost done?
So with Tangled, and this book is so different than my first two books. I switched genres. This is a
Oh,
mystery thriller.
oh wow.
Um, and like the first book, I had no idea how it was going to go. It came to me as I wrote. This book, I have the whole plot outlined in my head, which I feel like is making me procrastinate in writing it because I already know how it's going to end. So I'm only like I have two chapters done in the book.
Yeah,
So I have a long ways to go, but I feel like because I know how the whole story, like I have the whole story in my head, I was just putting it into words.
yeah, no, yeah, that's the one of the things, and this is what I think is so great about talking with other writers about that kind of that's because that's part of the process. Sometimes you have moments where you have good days and you're just writing straight, and then there's days like have a couple chapters done, or all right, this is where I'm at, and it's going to be like that. Okay, this is where it is for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Okay, oh, 2 months. Okay, I gotta get on it. It's like like you gotta get back to the
And it's just so funny from one book to the next how your writing process changes.
yeah. Would you say was the process similar for Growing Love? Was that a quick process too, or was it more like more of
So Growing Love was a little different for me. Because in my personal life, I went through a lot of changes as I was writing Growing Love.
oh
And
yeah,
I know some of what I was going through in my life came out in Growing Love. So Growing Love to me is way more vulnerable
yeah,
and real than Tangled Love. Um, so that part was more, I feel like it helped me write the book. Because as I was writing, and I don't want to give anything away because I don't
yeah.
want to
I know. Yeah, I
like
know.
spoil
I'm gonna
anything for.
that. Yeah, it's actually I'm already it's on the way to me, and I'm like, oh, I'm excited to read that book. So I'm just,
Yay!
but I'm glad you're
But
mentioning.
so I actually had to take a break while I was writing Growing Love, um, to figure out things in my personal life because as I was writing it, like it made me realize I had to make changes in my own life
Yeah,
before I could finish it in a way my readers deserved.
yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Wow. And I actually, I really appreciate that sort of that's more like, oh, this is an example of, someone, you're really in tune with like, okay, this is where I'm at right now. Because I think it's easy to, especially when you're writing something that's personal. How do you not let all this stuff just like you're just writing all this like blood and guts in the thing, which part of that, like for a first draft that no one's gonna see, that's great. But if you once you start like working out all the stuff, like how do you get to a place where it's like okay, well, this is going to be how do I get this to a place where readers can appreciate this? Like if someone else is going to be reading this, like okay, blood and guts is cool, but this is probably too much blood and guts. How do I like shift some of this out to make it like make it something that's like readable and enjoyable or whatever it is. So I can appreciate that thought about it. Like oh shoot, that's really important to think about. Like not just like, oh, I'm gonna write this and this is gonna be the best, like whatever. I don't care. Yeah, just put it all out there and like, okay, all right, but like, because some people that it's not like it's how does it help the story? Does it serve the story too? I think the part of that is like, is it serving the story? Like to have all this in there. So I think that's important to note. I think for all of us to I know it's certainly something that I've had to wrestle with myself. Like, gosh, this is kind of I need to like figure out how to I to get it like this is I need some of this stuff is here, it's cool, but you got to like navigate it in a way that's not like too much where it's like, well, no, there's nothing to you're just reading about like blood and guts, and it's not really what readers
Yeah.
want.
And I feel like So part of growing love, um, and I said this several times, like before it came out and even after it came out, I really feel like I bled my soul into the sequel. And there are parts of it that are so real to what I went through,
Yeah.
but then there are other parts that are fiction and just came
Yeah.
from my imagination.
Yeah.
But because there are parts that are so real to me, people who know me like thought everything that happens in that book happened to me, and they're like, oh my god, I can't believe you went through this. And I'm like, this is still
No.
a fictional book.
Right. Yeah. Right. That's such a hard thing to do, like especially like if friends and family like read something that you wrote that's personal. It's like it's hard to. I've had that same thing happen where it's like, well, look, I am writing. It is fiction, so you have to like you have to like remember that there's gonna be some stuff that's gonna there's some tinkering and fabrication with some of the stuff to make it. Because also like I'm not. This is you're trying to serve the serve the narrative. And like, this is what I'm not just telling you, like, otherwise I'd be writing a journal. I'm not writing in my journal. So
Exactly. Like it's not my memoirs.
right. Yeah. It's like, yeah, this is like a read my journal. Okay. Yeah. This is, yeah, that was all that's real, but that's, that's very different. I can totally appreciate that. I think. So I want to talk to you about, so I'm excited to get to this piece about, uh, characters. And so I want to talk about Sarah Simmons for a second. Sarah,
Yes.
she is like she was serious. I was a fan of like how she was she's a go-getter. Like Sarah's she's like about living and about like I went in like how like where did Sarah come from, like as far as like her like spark. She has a spark to me. Like it feels like, hey, Sarah's got
Yeah.
like, and okay, as I have to mention too, like it's awesome. She works at a bookstore with the cafe. Like that's the most romantic thing. Like ever. I feel like that's the most romantic setting of like stuff, and that's it. Like she has to be, of course, yeah. Sarah, sign me up. Where, where did she
So
come from?
a lot of people make the assumption that I'm Sarah. And there are a lot of similarities between Sarah and myself, but I firmly stand by I am not Sarah. She's a fictional character.
Yeah,
You obviously write from what you know. So there are some similarities between her and I, which I drew from for the character.
yeah,
But I tried to make her different enough so people wouldn't think she was me,
yeah,
because like especially chapter 7, when people read that, I don't want them to like
yeah,
picture me as they're
yeah.
reading that.
Yeah, it's like
So I tried to make us different enough, but there are similarities that people who know me like picked up on, and they're like, oh, you're Sarah. And I was like, kind of, but
right,
no.
right, yeah, yeah. How important was it for you to like? Because I feel like she has a like real agency, and I think that is that kind of thing. I always appreciate that in stories where it's like, especially romances. Like I mean, you've seen the questions, and I was just like, well, some romances. I don't read a lot of romances. Right? I'm not a major romance fan, but I've read a few, and sometimes the lead always feels sort of passive and stuff. She feels like things happen to her as opposed to like she's actually doing things to drive the story along. And I think for me, like that was such a major thing that I was like, oh, I was instantly connected with her. I was like, okay, Sarah, this is all right. I'm on this journey with you. I'm with you. No matter what happens, I'm here. From like the first chapter, I was in it. I was like, this is it. And so I guess I wonder, was that a conscious thought for you to like to make her um, like she had to be driving she was driving the car. This was about. Like how conscious was that for you?
Yeah. So I've never been a fan of the damsel in distress stories.
Yes.
Um, so my dad, he's a single father of 4. He worked really hard to raise me and my 3 siblings all on his own. And he raised me to never rely on anyone for anything. Because if I ever got into a situation that I wanted out of, like he wanted me to be in a position where I could do that for myself. So I've always like identified as a strong, independent woman, and I wanted Sarah, like my main character, to also be strong and independent and not have to rely on a man to get where she wanted in life.
Yeah. I think that was amazing. I said, oh yeah, this is like I love characters like that, particularly female characters, because there's a lot of stuff in like a lot of media, books, movies too, and a lot of other things where she just like she's not. I was like, oh, why is she not? She can easily do this and do that. Like, why is she just not? What's going on? Like, and there's something it should go beyond like yo, most humans in that situation would just do this. Why is she not doing this? Like, what is going? She should be doing X, Y, Z. So, but I love that Sarah wasn't like that. Sarah's like, this is she was driving the whole story essentially. And I think that was like, oh, this is that kind of thing is always so refreshing to me. Like, oh, this is like, I'm with this. Oh, sorry,
Oh,
my
that's okay.
I read that. What is this going on? Oh, I am using, I haven't used this computer for, this is a newer computer, and I'm like, oh, I'm trying to learn how to.
Oh, do we need to like jump back in?
No, no,
Maybe.
no, no, no. This was
Oh,
a,
okay.
this was a. Oh, this is, I see what this is. Oh, I got it. Let me just do this. Mhm. Uh, okay, hopefully that worked. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. I think we're good. All right. Okay. Yes. So we're excellent. That's great. Uh, Sarah. Oh, right. Here we go. Sarah. I was like, here we are. Yeah, so she's an amazing character. I loved her, and I love how three-dimensional and real she felt. And I just, and this got me thinking about another thing. That was, when I was, I remember going back when I was writing my first review for the book, and thinking, man, I know there's probably going to be some people that are not going to like Sarah. Just like, I mean, and immediately they're going to be like turned off from the journey. I think, and I think, and I guess, what is your, do you think this that Sarah's unlikable? Like, and how do you respond? Like, what do you think of? I don't like Sarah. She's just not a nice person. Like, I don't like her character. Like, if someone says that, like, what is that? Is that accurate? Like, what do you say to that?
Yeah, so I've definitely received a few reviews where people didn't like Sarah. They didn't like the way that she treated Charlie and Tim. But for me, I kind of take that as a compliment. Like, I made this character so real, and like any real person, there's going to be people who don't like them.
Right.
And so to me, I feel like I did my job right as an author.
I would agree. I think there's some. I think that, right, that's what that actually adds more realism to this, to the stuff. You're just like, well, yeah, there are people in real life, if someone you would see, you would say, I don't like that person, why'd they do that? That's really not like, that's a that just made Sarah feel more real. I think for me, I tend to look at it like, well, Sarah, she's not, I don't feel like she's unlikable. She's just like, she's a human. She was made very human decisions. She just made, you can say, I don't like her, as, she's not a good person, but I think it's really, she just made decisions that people, not everyone agrees with. And I think I mean, that's how I saw it.
And we all do that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And that's the other thing. I was like, oh yeah, everyone knows what that's like. So you go like, that made me actually really appreciate her that much more. I was like, well, I'm with, yeah, right. Yeah. So it's like, just like, I'm with it. Like, I think that's, she felt that much more real to me. And I think she's great. And speaking of, so Sarah, so speaking of her, I want to talk about the man who raised her. So Edward, Edward to me was like he was like he was like the key piece of this whole story to me. Like, in a lot of ways, it's like Edward is like the man. Like, he's like the one of the unsung heroes of the story. And I think in a couple of different ways. And he was such a likable character, and such a just the heart. Even though there was an exterior about him but you felt like he had a heart too. He was this very beautiful character that you wrote. And I guess I'm curious, where did Edward come from within you?
So
What was that about? Like, what was
all of the characters in the Tangled Love series are fiction except for Edward.
Mhm.
Like, Edward is my dad.
Yeah.
He's very heavily influenced by my dad. Edward is my judge's name, which is grandfather in Polish.
Oh,
So that's where the name came from. Everything about the character of Edward, from working at the GM plant to playing craps, like, that's all my dad. Even some of the like quotes from Edward in the book are straight from my dad.
yeah, that felt so real. I was like, this is like that's the other thing about, so all the characters in the book felt super distinctive to me. Every character. And when you come to Edward, like I've met dads like that. So I'm going, this is like, oh, and I've worked with dads like that. So I go, oh, this is like it felt very familiar, and it's like super, like, oh, like I know this guy. This is just, and it was cool to spend to spend some time with him a little bit. I was like, this is cool to just sitting in here, like we're Charlie, hitting with Charlie, having a beer. It was like, oh, I'm hanging out with Edward. This is like, this is,
And that's also why I dedicated Tangled Love to my dad. A lot of people, because there are a lot of sex scenes in the book, they were like, why would you dedicate a book like this to your dad? But because my dad's been such a huge part of my life and raised me in the way he did, I felt like I had to give him that tribute
Yeah.
in my first book.
No, that was beautiful, and I caught that because when I get books, I read every thing, like from the dedications to the thing to the appendices, all of it. So it was like it was beautiful to see that. I was like, oh, this is, and you feel that like the connection and the love that's there, and I think and it's similar between Sarah and Edward, like that was very the I mentioned I think in one of the other questions about yeah, this is a romance, but there's something that's very the romance piece too that I think that extends to Sarah and Edward. There's a real love there. Like you feel like this is like a real like this is it was such a and that was actually part of some of the more affecting stuff. Like it was all affecting to me, but I was like there was some real. I'm not gonna lie, there was some real tears and stuff. Like I was like, dang man, this is this. my, this is so I was with it, and I think I have to tell you again. Like I wrote this note to you. You've seen, but I have to tell you again. Like that it's such powerful work and such just a well like developed character. I just yeah, Edward
Thank
is
you.
he's probably one of my favorite. He's one of my favorite characters in the book, and I just was like, this is like this is amazing. So I had to ask you about that, and I also I want to mention there's a piece in the book. She's having to come to terms with what's going on with her dad, and I that was so resonant to me, and I think I just was it hard to write. Was it hard to write that? Like how difficult was it to get in that headspace of like Sarah really sort of grappling with the realities of what was going on and how to sort of navigate that with in considering like her dynamic with how much she loved her dad and how much that was there. Was that difficult to get yourself in the headspace?
So when I wrote that chapter, I literally put myself in Sarah's shoes and imagined my own dad in that situation. So that whole chapter, I was bawling my eyes out as I was writing it because like I pictured it being my own dad and what I would want to say to him in that moment. And so that was my writing process during that chapter. There were a lot of tears writing it and then going back and reading it after it published, like still tears.
Gosh, I no, I felt it. I was like, oh man, I'm feeling this. Yeah, because I reading it was super affecting, and I was just bawling throughout the whole thing. Like, oh, this is like, gosh darn it, man. I also also having been at the hospital several times with my own dad, it was like, shoot, this is Sarah. I feel you. Like, this is the whole. I was with it. This is like the. So yeah, super like, man. It was and that kind of stuff. That's sort of like rich stuff to me, and that actually that part of that was what made me go, dang it, I have to talk to her about this book. Like I have to talk to her about this book. Like I must have read that in like at least a few times, going, oh man, this is I have to. Sorry, see stuff is happening. I need to.
I love it.
I'm like just like thinking about it because I remember like how it hit me. Like there was like a couple sections of the book where I was like emotionally like, fudge, this is we have to talk. I just need to talk to this person about this book. So
That makes me so happy.
yeah. So
Like when I can write something and my intentions behind it can resonate with my readers, like that just means so much to me. And I feel like that's what us as writers like set out to do. And when that message is received well,
yeah.
it's
Oh
a good
yeah.
feeling.
Oh man, that's great. I'm happy. I'm so happy that you get to feel the sort of the reciprocal stuff. Like when people are like, yo, Brianna, this is what like, and you get to like that. That's a real, geez, I'm happy that you're experiencing that part too. It's like, this is like, something you'd written, without the intent of, you hadn't intended to publish it originally. There was no, right, going to be out there. So it's just like, oh man, this is what? Like, this is look at this gem. This is a beauty. Yeah, yeah. So I just had to, to mention that piece. And I think, and I think that part, that's a good segue into like the men. This is another crucial piece of I mean, springboarding from Edward, who's like a sort of a pillar. He's one of the pillar men in the story. Then you have like Tim and Charlie. And this is another thing I loved so much about the book, the notion that again, in other, like I read a couple like love triangle things, and the guys are always like, there's something they feel too similar to me. There's like, well, this guy, you know, they almost have like either down to the almost like the same jobs or like the same types of like similar sort of facial features and stuff. I was like, this is like, but Tim and Charlie feel super distinct. And also, you know, when they actually get to talk with each other, is a like actually sit and like talk with each other like properly, that's beautiful too. I'm like, that's I was like, oh, this is like, this is for real. Like, this is like, I'm with this, and I can respect this, and I appreciate this dynamic. And even though it's complicated, there's a lot of complications going on. It's complicated, but it's like some real, you know, there's moments of when they get to really connect and say, oh, you know, I can, oh, I see why. Okay, I see what's going on. I do. You're cool. I like this guy. This guy's cool. Like, this is. Tell me about that. About Tim and Charlie. What was going on with them? Like, how did you? Was it easy for you to sort of get into the? Because it feels very like, yo, you know, it's like, all right, again, I knew these people. I know these guys. This is like a, like, like, where did they come from for you? Like, did you were they like, did you know people like that in life, or were they like pieces you sort of drew from different people, and like, how did you construct those two characters?
So I have a male best friend who I've known since we were like 6 years old. There's never been any romantic interest between us at all. Like, he's like a brother to me. He comes to like family holidays. He stood up in my sister's wedding. Like, he really is family. But so I feel like that relationship kind of pulled into the Charlie character, minus the whole love interest part.
Yeah.
But so I feel like my friend Mike was a big inspiration for the character of Charlie. And then I feel like with all the other characters in the book, they're just a combination of my favorite parts of all the people in my life.
That's fantastic. That's great. What about, I have to ask you this too, because this is something that I was thinking, like, what about Luca? Like, Luca was a character in the early part of the story. And I'm curious too, like, was there potentially, was there in the early drafts of it, was there supposed to be more for him? Or like, was he supposed to be like a, I'm just, this is like separate, like, I'm just curious about, like, I wonder,
Yeah.
like, what's up with Luca? Like, what's going on? Like,
So Luca wasn't added until a later draft, and that was by a recommendation from my friend Amanda, who read like the first draft. She was like, well, you established that Sarah's in Italy to like find love, so I feel like you really need to like put her there to find love, like have her be on a date when she gets that life-changing phone call. And I was like, I love that feedback. So that's where I incorporated it. And I feel like with all the love interest characters in my book, like I made them too likable, so people wanted more of Luca. So without giving anything away, like, just know for growing love, like, it's a small world, and Luca may or may not come back into the picture.
So I'm saying I had a thought. I said, well, maybe he's in this, maybe growing love, maybe he might come back. But I'll tell you, I'm glad I'm not the only one, because I was like, yo, what's up? Justice for Luca. I went more like, where's Luca? Does he come back in the story? I was like, oh, he's not. Okay. I was like, I wanted more of Luca. And I have to tell, like, you know, I have to mention to you, you probably guessed this from how I wrote the review, but it was like, there was the way you described him in the early, I was like, this guy, okay, I'm.
It was the Italian accent for me.
Yeah. And it was like 2 sentences. I was like, I had to, you know, I don't know if you do this when you're reading a book. You know, you see a passage that's really well written and that you really like, and you might mark it, or you might take a picture of it or do something. Like I definitely, I'm like, oh, then I said, wait, don't take a picture of it yet, because what if you find something else that you might want? So just, you know, mark where the pages are, so you can go back and take pictures of things that are really beautiful. But it was like that, and there was a lot of it throughout the book, but that section still stayed with me. I was like, it was just like 2 sentences, like, yo, Luca is like, I see this man, and he's a god, like, he's gorgeous. Like so I had to, I had to share that, and I'm excited to know that, you know, just like in real life, you know, it is a small world, and you know, that you know, excites me further to you know, to go ahead and read Growing Love. I'm excited to see what's going on.